At 9:11 that morning, a baggage handler in grease-darkened coveralls stopped beside Cart B and stared at three ordinary suitcases bound for Lisbon. The airport director thought he was wasting her time. Then he asked for 7 minutes, and the entire terminal began to change. By 9:10 that morning, Terminal C had already become the kind of place where people stopped seeing one another clearly. Wheels rattled over polished tile. Departure boards changed every few seconds in blocks of amber light. Business travelers moved with the rigid efficiency of people who believed lateness was a moral failure. Families drifted in loose clusters around strollers, backpacks, and half-finished coffees. Overhead, the announcements arrived in a calm, recorded voice that made every disruption sound temporary, manageable, almost abstract. On the lower service level, beneath all of that controlled movement, Daniel Mercer stood beside Belt Corridor 3 with a handheld scanner in one hand and a laminated loading chart folded into the other. He wore Navy airport coveralls with the cuffs faintly darkened by grease and rainwater, steel-toed boots, and the orange reflective vest required for anyone working the baggage lanes. His badge identified him as a ramp and transfer handler for East State International Airport. The badge said nothing about the rest of his life, which was typical. Systems rarely did. Daniel was 36 years old and had learned the sort of silence that comes from carrying too many responsibilities at once. 3 years earlier, after his wife Elena died during a winter ICU stay that emptied the savings they had built carefully over a decade, silence had become less a personality trait than a working method. He had a daughter named Sophie, 8 years old, who liked astronomy, sharpened her pencils obsessively, and still slept with a faded blue neck pillow from Elena's last trip. Daniel's shifts began before sunrise more often than not, and on the mornings when school opened too early for the neighbor downstairs to take Sophie, she came with him as far as the employee cafeteria, where Mrs. Alvarez from catering kept an eye on her until the school shuttle stopped at the staff entrance. That morning, Sophie had drawn a small constellation map on the back of one of Daniel's old loading manifests and tucked it into his lunch bag without telling him. He had found it during the 6:20 break, folded between an apple and a peanut butter sandwich. 7 stars connected in uneven silver pen, at the bottom in careful block letters. Fee or when things look mixed up. He had placed it in the inner pocket of his vest and gone back to work. There were people at East State who thought baggage handling was simple labor performed by replaceable men with strong backs and low expectations. Daniel had spent 9 years proving the opposite without ever bothering to announce it. He understood transfer timing, weight distribution, reroute bottlenecks, customs holds, and the subtle ways panic moved through a system before anyone in management admitted there was a problem. More than that, he understood patterns. The human eye, when trained long enough, begins to notice repetitions that software often smooths into acceptable variants. A suitcase turning up too early, a transfer tag placed at the wrong angle, a priority sticker applied to the wrong class of route, the kind of details most people never register because they are looking for dramatic errors, not quiet ones. He had developed that eye first in freight, then in airport ground operations, and now it functioned almost below conscious thought. He could stand beside a moving belt and know when something in the stream did not belong there. Not because it was obvious, because it was slightly, precisely wrong. That was why he stopped walking when he saw the first black roller case. It came down the inbound connector from domestic screening at 9:11, tagged for Gate 24, Flight 618 to Lisbon. Nothing about the bag itself demanded attention. Mid-range shell case. No luxury branding. No damage. Standard gray wraparound strap. But the transfer tag had been threaded through the top handle from left to right instead of right to left, which was not how East State's North screening team worked. Their supervisors had standardized the direction 2 years earlier because left to right threading jammed more easily during secondary sort. Small thing. Easy to miss. Daniel watched the case roll past onto cart lane B. Then a second bag arrived 40 seconds later. Same route, same gate, same left-to-right threading. Same gray strap. He said nothing yet. A beat passed. Then the third case appeared. This one was larger. Hard shell graphite with a red priority sticker, placed a quarter-inch too low. Again gate 24. Again Lisbon. Again the same threading direction. The same strap. The same oddly clean handle with no travel wear. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Not suspicion exactly. Recognition. Beside him, Curtis Bell, a younger handler in his first year, kept scanning transfer barcodes with the quick, distracted speed of someone trying to stay ahead of the belt. Curtis noticed Daniel stop and glanced up. Something wrong? Daniel looked at the bags now lined on cart B. 3 cases, similar dimensions, similar straps, similar tagging habits. Too similar. Maybe nothing, he said. Curtis followed his gaze. They're all for 24. I can see that. Curtis waited. Daniel crouched briefly near the cart, not touching the bags, just looking. The scuff patterns were wrong. Travelers who use their luggage carry history on it without thinking. Curb rash, baggage scratches, old adhesive shadow from previous tags, one wheel cleaner than the others from replacement. These 3 looked field-aged rather than travel-aged. Manufactured wear, enough to pass a glance, not enough to satisfy his eye. He stood. Who loaded the domestic feeder from North Screening? Daniel asked. Curtis checked his tablet. Says auto clear from zone N2. Daniel took the tablet, scanned the timestamps and gave it back. The 3 bags had entered the system 2 minutes apart under different passenger names, but their secondary route stamps had been applied within the same 12-second window. That was possible. It was also wrong. He looked toward the service elevator that led to the upper operations offices. Somewhere above them, people in tailored jackets were discussing throughput, customer satisfaction, and quarterly efficiency metrics in air-conditioned rooms with glass walls. Down here, the system was telling a different story. What is it? Curtis asked again, quieter this time. Daniel did not answer immediately. He had learned caution. Airports trained people to report, but institutions also trained them to feel the cost of being wrong. False alarms created paperwork. Paperwork created scrutiny. Scrutiny moved downward faster than praise ever did. Still, the pattern sat in front of him with the cold steadiness of a fact. Hold cart B, Daniel said. Curtis blinked. Hold it? Temporarily. For what reason? Daniel looked at the 3 cases once more. Unverified tag sequence. Routing inconsistency. Curtis swallowed. That's enough to stop a gate load? No, Daniel said. But it's enough to ask. He keyed his radio. Static crackled once. Then Operations Control answered. Daniel identified himself, gave belt corridor, cart number, gate number, and requested a secondary review on 3 linked bags routed to Flight 618. He kept his voice level, specific, unemotional, the way people do when they know the language matters as much as the information. The pause on the other end lasted just long enough to mean something. State reason for security concern, the controller said. Daniel kept his eyes on the bags. Matching manual tag orientation inconsistent with originating team standard. Similar physical wear pattern across separate passenger records. Secondary stamps clustered inside 12-second interval under separate check-ins, requesting visual and identity verification before load release. Another pause. Then, copy. Stand by. Curtis had gone still beside him. Handlers nearby kept working, but not as casually as before. In service environments, tension spreads through posture first. A slower scan, a glance held too long. Someone pretending not to listen. Only later would most of them understand that Daniel had already seen more than the 3 bags. He had seen the shape of intent beneath them, not just sameness, coordination. The service elevator opened at the far end of the corridor 3 minutes later. Marina Holt stepped out first, followed by an assistant from security compliance and a uniformed floor supervisor who looked as though he regretted being present already. Marina was the airport's operations director, 42 years old, immaculate even on disruption days, with a white blouse under a charcoal jacket and the kind of posture that made hallways feel narrower when she entered them. She had built her reputation on speed, discipline, and the visible elimination of inefficiency. Under her leadership, East State had reduced turnaround delays, tightened contractor compliance, and made itself attractive to investors who preferred their transportation systems polished and measurable. She also disliked being surprised. That morning had already been difficult. A weather delay over Atlanta had backed up 2 inbound crews. A customs staffing shortage had triggered complaints from premium passengers. A city council delegation was touring the renovated executive lounge at 11. Marina had spent the last hour extinguishing problems before they could become visible to the wrong people. So when she heard that a baggage handler on the lower level had requested a security review based on what sounded, to her, like intuition wrapped in technical language, irritation arrived before curiosity. She approached Cart B without hurrying. The assistant held a tablet. The supervisor avoided Daniel's eyes. "You called this in?" Marina asked. Daniel nodded once. Yes, her gaze moved over him quickly. Coveralls, reflective vest, scanner clipped at the hip, grease dark at the cuff. Then to the 3 bags. Then back to him. "And your concern," she said, "is that the luggage looks similar." Daniel did not react to the reduction. "My concern is that the pattern doesn't fit the route history." She extended a hand. The assistant passed her the tablet. Marina reviewed the passenger names, ticket classes, scan times. On the surface, everything aligned neatly enough to support dismissal. 3 unrelated passengers, same international destination, all checked within a plausible window. No automated red flags. Around them, the belt kept moving. Marina looked up. "Mr. Mercer, do you understand what happens when someone uses the word security without evidence?" He held her gaze. "I used the phrase review. You triggered escalation. Because the sequence is wrong." A beat passed. She stepped closer to the cart, examining the bags as if proximity itself might expose how unnecessary this was. Every busy terminal in the country has clusters like this, not with those stamps. Her eyes sharpened a fraction. "You are not in screening. No, you are not in intelligence. No, you move luggage." Daniel said nothing. The room seemed to contract around the sentence she had not yet spoken. Curtis stared at the floor. The floor supervisor shifted his weight. Somewhere behind them, a baggage tug reversed with a short warning tone that sounded suddenly far away. Marina handed the tablet back to her assistant. "This is exactly how false alarms start," she said, no longer speaking quietly. "Someone sees coincidence, mistakes it for expertise, and pulls resources off actual work." Daniel's face remained still, but Sophie's folded star map pressed lightly against his inner vest pocket as he breathed. He had not come there to impress anyone. He had come there because something in Cart B did not belong in the system. "I'm asking for 7 minutes," he said. Marina gave a short, disbelieving exhale, and the corridor began to go quiet. Marina Holt had spent most of her career learning to identify 2 kinds of employees quickly: the ones who brought her solutions and the ones who brought her delays. In her experience, men on lower operational tiers often confused prolonged exposure to a system with authority over it. They mistook familiarity for judgment. They saw a pattern in ordinary friction and wanted the entire machine to stop and admire their instincts. East State did not run on instincts. It ran on procedure, throughput, and confidence in the chain above you. That was what she believed as she stood in Belt Corridor 3 looking at Daniel Mercer and 3 perfectly ordinary suitcases. 7 minutes for what? She asked. For a manual verification against source imaging and check-in capture, Daniel said. If I'm wrong, Cart B moves and you lose nothing. The assistant beside her, a compliance analyst named Tessa Reed, glanced down at her tablet. Manual imaging pull from North Screening will take longer than 7. Not if someone with access requests only the check-in stills and route stamps, Daniel said. Marina turned her head slowly toward him. You seem very certain for someone who does not sit in security review. Daniel did not answer the bait. I'm certain the tags were threaded by the same hands. I'm certain the secondary stamps were clustered too tightly for separate passengers. I'm certain those handles are cleaner than the wheel wear should allow. After that, I'm asking for verification. The floor supervisor, Neil Bauer, cleared his throat in the small, doomed way of a man trying to reduce tension by making himself useful. Director Holt, if we isolate the three and keep the rest of Gate 24 moving, operational impact is minimal. Marina did not look at him. Operational impact is not the only impact, Neil. You freeze international baggage on a handler's hunch, and word spreads in 6 minutes. Someone overhears the wrong phrase. Suddenly we have an incident where there is no incident. Daniel looked at the 3 bags again. Or we have an incident because nobody wanted one. That landed harder than he intended. Not because of its volume, because of its accuracy. Tessa shifted her tablet to the other arm. There is a way to do a low-visibility verification, she said carefully. No public stop, no announcement. We can mark the cart for secondary handling and pull the source records quietly. Marina's expression did not change, but something behind it tightened. She disliked being maneuvered in front of subordinates. She disliked even more the possibility that if she refused, and Daniel turned out to be right, there would be a record of that refusal. You are both overstating this, she said. Then, after a beat, fine. 5 minutes. Quiet review only. No wider escalation. No language beyond routing discrepancy. Is that clear? Daniel nodded once. Clear. Marina looked directly at him. And if this is nothing, Mr. Mercer, you will explain to your supervisor why you chose to disrupt an international load during active departure flow. He said nothing. He did not need to. Tessa moved first, already opening a restricted portal on the tablet. She requested source check-in stills for the 3 passenger records, route stamp history, and originating counter footage keyed to the baggage IDs. The airport network was fast when executive authority touched it. One of the many quiet truths of institutions. Curtis stood half a step behind Daniel now, trying not to appear as though he had chosen a side. The nearby handlers had slowed without admitting it. Nobody was openly staring. Everybody was listening. The first still loaded 38 seconds later. Passenger 1. Male, mid-50s. Checked in at counter N14 at 8:32. The image showed a navy duffel, not a black roller case. Tessa blinked and tapped the screen again, assuming mismatch. The second still loaded. Passenger 2. Woman in a cream coat at self-service kiosk N9. She checked a floral hard-shell suitcase with a yellow ribbon on the handle, not the graphite case on cart B. The third still appeared. Passenger 3 had checked no luggage at all. Carry-on only. The record was plain. For the first time since arriving, Marina stopped performing confidence and simply looked at the tablet. A beat passed. Then Daniel said, very quietly, "Now pull the route stamps again." Tessa obeyed without comment. The source records expanded. The 3 IDs on cart B had entered the system through a service-side insertion node near North Screening Maintenance Access, not through live passenger check-in. The passenger records had been attached afterward by manual override from a terminal supervisor credential. Neil Bauer took one involuntary step backward. Jesus. Marina turned to him sharply. Do not say that again. But the room had already changed. The texture of it, the air itself, what had been a disagreement was now a breach. Tessa's voice lowered. These were inserted from a supervisor credential at 8:41, manual attached to legitimate passenger files. Whoever did this knew enough to pick records already bound for Gate 24. Daniel asked the question nobody wanted first. Can we identify the credential? Tessa looked at the log and went still. Yes. Marina held out her hand. Tessa hesitated for half a second, then surrendered the tablet. The credential belonged to Victor Shaw, Senior Transfer Coordinator for International Baggage Routing. 12 years at East State. Clean record. Broad access. Cleared for service-side overrides during congestion events. He was also, Marina remembered with an immediate coldness, currently assigned to upper-level departure flow for the city council delegation and premium guest transfers, meaning he was upstairs. Moving freely. Daniel saw part of that realization cross her face. How many more can he insert? Tessa answered before Marina did. If it's him, or someone using his badge, as many as he wants until access is cut. Marina was already moving. Neil, lock service side override permissions for all international routing supervisors except Central Command. Tessa, send an immediate silent pull request to internal security. No radio language, text only. Use breach code gray, baggage network compromise. Curtis straightened as if struck. You saw nothing and you say nothing outside this corridor. Understood? Yes, ma'am. She turned to Daniel then, and the shift in her expression was subtle but absolute. He was no longer a nuisance. He was now the first person who had seen the shape of the problem. What exactly did you notice first? She asked. He answered without triumph. Tag threading, then wheel wear, then clustered stamps. Anything else? Yes. He looked at the 3 cases. They're packed to a similar weight, heavy enough to matter, too balanced for personal travel. Nobody liked where that suggested the story might be going. Marina inhaled once, controlled and fast. We are not opening those bags here. No, Daniel said. But they don't get near an aircraft. They won't. Only later would she understand that this was the moment authority changed shape. Not publicly, not with apology, but in the quiet operational way that matters more. She stopped speaking to him like a man beneath the system and started speaking to him like a witness inside it. Tessa's phone vibrated. She read the incoming response from internal security and her face lost what little color remained. Director Holt. Marina took the phone. The message was brief. Victor Shaw badge location active near VIP mezzanine access. Secondary anomaly. 2 additional manual baggage attachments flagged to Gate 31 Dubai departure. Possible coordinated insertion across outbound international lanes. Marina read it once, then again, then handed the phone back. The problem is larger than Cart B, she said. Daniel had already understood that. He was looking past her now, not at the corridor, but through the architecture of the airport in his mind. Gate 24 Lisbon, Gate 31 Dubai, different terminals, different conveyor branches, same method, same kind of access, same confidence. This isn't theft, he said. Marina looked at him. No. Tessa swallowed. Then what is it? Daniel answered with the same flat calm he had used from the beginning. Someone is placing bags into outbound international routes under real passenger identities, which means they're counting on the bags being trusted long enough to leave the country. Neil said nothing at all now. Above them, faint through concrete and ductwork, an announcement echoed from the public concourse. Boarding had begun somewhere. People were buying coffee. Children were asking for window seats. 1,000 ordinary motions continued overhead while the shape of something dangerous widened beneath them. Marina made 3 decisions in less than 10 seconds. Neil, shut down all service-side manual baggage attachments airport-wide. If anyone complains, route them to my office. He hurried away. Tessa, I want every manual attachment in the last 4 hours. Every one. Group by credential, gate, and outbound country. Tessa nodded and moved. Then Marina looked at Daniel. You're coming with me. Curtis stared. Daniel's expression did not change. Where? To the control room first, then wherever this leads. He glanced once toward the belt, toward the work he was supposed to be doing, toward the ordinary obligations of a man whose life did not usually permit deviation. Sophie would be at the cafeteria until the school shuttle. His shift would be logged against corridor performance. None of that mattered now in the way it had 15 minutes earlier. He nodded. All right. Marina started toward the elevator, then stopped. One more thing. He waited. If internal security moves too slowly, she said, I want to know what you would look for next. Daniel thought for only a second. Matching straps, manufactured wear, supervisor credentials used just before high-volume international pushes, and anyone who knows the baggage system well enough to hide inside normal congestion. She held his gaze. For the first time, there was no dismissal in hers, only pressure and recognition. Then they stepped into the elevator together. The doors closed on Belt Corridor 3, on Cart B, on Curtis Bell, standing beside three silent suitcases that had almost made it onto an international aircraft under the names of people who had never touched them. And upstairs, where the glass was cleaner and the suits cost more, Victor Shaw was still moving through the airport as though he belonged there. The elevator opened onto operations control with a soft chime that felt offensively calm for what the room had become. Wall-sized screens tracked departures, weather bands, gate changes, baggage flow, and security overlays in neat blocks of color that suggested order even as order began to fail beneath them. Analysts sat at curved desks under cold white light. Phones flashed. Headsets moved from one ear to the other. Nobody was shouting. That was the first sign the situation was serious. Real institutions do not become loud when they are in danger. They become precise. Marina Holt crossed the room without breaking stride. Conversations shortened as she passed. Tessa was already at a side station pulling manual override logs into a clustered map. 3 more suspicious baggage attachments had appeared in the last 11 minutes. 2 to Dubai, 1 to Frankfurt, all tied to legitimate passenger records, all inserted through supervisor-level credentials. 2 under Victor Shaw's badge, 2 under credentials belonging to people who were physically elsewhere according to staff location pings. Badge cloning, Daniel thought, or internal sharing. Neither possibility improved the shape of the day. What do we know? Marina asked. A gray-haired security systems manager named Paul Renner turned from the main console. Internal security has eyes moving to the VIP mezzanine and Gate 31 service corridor. TSA liaison has been notified under restricted language. We have not triggered public containment. Victor, his badge pinged at mezzanine access 3 minutes ago. Then nothing. Daniel stepped closer to the screens. Nothing means removed or shielded. Paul looked at him, then at Marina. He's with me, she said. Paul answered the question. Could be either. Badge in a locker, foil wrap, dead zone, or handoff. Daniel's eyes moved to the baggage route map. The flagged bags were not random across the airport. They formed a pattern around flights leaving within the next 50 minutes, all long-haul international, all loaded from service corridors with lower visual scrutiny because premium passenger flow drew most upper-level attention. He said it before anyone else did. They're using the council tour and VIP movement as cover. Marina turned. Explain. More executives upstairs, more escorts, more restricted corridor openings, more people assuming someone else already checked the badge. He pointed to the flight grid. And they're not choosing the biggest departures. They're choosing the ones crowded enough to blend, but not so crowded that a delayed cart draws immediate heat. Paul studied him for half a second longer than courtesy required. Then he looked back at the screens. He's right. There are moments when power reveals itself by speaking. This was not one of them. Marina did not defend her authority. She redirected it. Freeze every flagged bag on the ground. Quietly. I want visual confirmation on all service corridor carts feeding Gate 24, 31, and 18. No aircraft loading without direct release from this room. A younger analyst raised a hand. Director, if we stop 3 international pushes at once, station managers will escalate. Let them. Tessa's voice cut in from the side station. There's more. She projected a list to the center screen. The attached passenger identities on 4 of the flagged bags share one thing. They were all upgraded this morning from standard business to premium priority handling. Daniel felt the answer before he spoke it. So the bags move faster and with fewer questions, Marina said. Tessa nodded. Priority tags create procedural trust. A beat passed. Then Paul's console flashed red on the lower right corner. Internal camera request. VIP Mezzanine East Hall. The feed opened. Victor Shaw appeared on screen for less than 2 seconds, walking beside a catering lift with his jacket folded over one arm and a phone to his ear. He was 48. Compact, neat, forgettable in the way competent logistics men often are. Nothing theatrical, nothing that invited memory. His expression was calm, too calm. He turned through a service door marked Authorized Personnel Only and vanished from camera coverage into the connector leading toward premium baggage transfer and diplomatic cargo access. Paul swore under his breath. Daniel was already looking at the route schematic mounted beside the screens. Where does that connector lead if he avoids the main corridor? Paul joined him. 2 options: premium transfer cage or diplomatic outbound staging. Marina's face changed by a degree. Diplomatic staging is sealed. Usually, Paul said. Daniel pointed to a maintenance split on the schematic. Not if someone opens the refrigeration service lane behind catering. The room went quiet. Paul checked the route, then looked at Marina. That lane bypasses 2 camera angles and reaches outbound staging in under 4 minutes, Daniel said. Only later would some of them understand why Marina made the next decision as quickly as she did. Not because she trusted Daniel completely. Trust takes longer. Because she had already paid once for dismissing the person closest to the system. She was not going to make the same mistake twice in the same hour. Paul, send internal security to diplomatic staging and premium transfer cage, she said. Tessa, cut access to refrigeration lane doors. Now. Tessa typed, then stopped. I can't. Why? They're already open. Nobody in the room moved for 1 full second. Then Marina looked at Daniel. Come on. They ran. Not dramatically. Not wildly. Airports are built to punish panic with delay. They moved through side corridors at the fastest pace that still preserved function. Marina in low heels striking sharp across concrete. Daniel, half a step ahead now because he knew the service architecture better. 2 internal security officers joined them at the next junction. One was broad-shouldered and young. The other, older, carried the controlled breathing of a former military policeman. Neither wasted time asking why a baggage handler was leading the route. The refrigeration service lane smelled faintly of Freon, wet cardboard, and metal dust. Rolling racks stood against the wall. A catering cart had been left crooked near the access bend, as if abandoned in the middle of an ordinary task. That, more than anything, made Daniel slow. He held out an arm. The others stopped. What? One officer whispered. Daniel pointed to the floor. 1 wheel track cut through a thin spill of melting ice and then disappeared. The matching return track never came back. Someone pushed loaded weight through here recently, he said, and didn't return with it. Marina looked ahead toward the steel fire door at the end of the lane. Diplomatic staging? Daniel nodded. Or the cage beside it. The older officer signaled the younger one left. He took right. Marina stayed back exactly 1 pace. Daniel did not. He moved toward the door because he had already understood something the others had not yet said aloud. Whoever built this operation knew airports well enough to count on procedure, but not well enough to count on him. That was the gap, the one detail everyone else missed. The older officer pushed the door. Inside, the premium transfer cage was empty except for 2 silver freight containers, 1 half-wrapped pallet, and Victor Shaw standing near a rolling case workstation with a badge lanyard in one hand and a compact signal jammer in the other. Beside him was another man Daniel recognized after a beat not by name but by type. Subcontracted route technician, temporary clearance, the kind of face operations forget 3 days after onboarding. Victor looked up. For the first time all day, his calm broke. Not much, just enough. The younger officer raised his voice. Hands where I can see them. Victor did not comply. His eyes moved once to the silver freight container nearest the wall. Daniel followed the glance and understood immediately. Don't let him touch that container. Victor moved. The older officer hit him hard and low, driving him sideways into the workstation. The jammer clattered across the floor. The second man bolted for the side door and made it exactly 3 steps before Daniel caught the rolling brake bar from a nearby cart and jammed it cleanly through the door handles as it swung. The man slammed into steel, stumbled, and the younger officer took him down. Nobody laughed after that. Victor was on one knee, pinned, breathing hard now. Marina stepped into the cage and looked from the jammer to the freight container to the half-processed baggage tags on the workstation. There were 8 of them. More than the 5 already flagged, some attached to passports from countries the listed travelers had never visited, some marked for diplomatic transfer. That changed everything. Paul's voice came over the officer's radio from control. Status. Marina took the radio. 2 in custody. Seal this cage. Bomb squad and federal liaison now. Repeat, now? The word bomb was not spoken. It did not need to be. The container, once opened by specialists 11 minutes later, held not an explosive device, but a tightly packed set of high-value restricted microprocessors, biomedical chips, and export-controlled avionics modules hidden inside false shell luggage and shielded cases. Millions of dollars in technology. Enough to trigger federal seizure, international investigation, and criminal charges that would move far beyond airport discipline. The fake passenger records had been designed to send the cargo out under the cover of ordinary departures, then disappear it on arrival through shell handlers overseas. Smuggling, not sabotage. Worse in some ways. Cleaner. Longer running. By then, it was already too late for anyone to pretend this had been a misunderstanding. Operations Control froze all manual baggage overrides. Federal agents arrived. TSA sealed 3 outbound carts and 2 staging zones. Gate managers were told only what they needed to know. Flights delayed, but not publicly explained. In the quiet machinery of the airport, entire channels of movement shifted around the damage. Victor Shaw said almost nothing. The subcontract technician said even less. But the workstation logs, cloned credentials, and recovered jammer spoke with more clarity than either man ever could. Marina remained in the transfer cage longer than necessary after the agents took over. Daniel stood near the doorway, reflective vest dulled under warehouse lighting, scanner still clipped to his hip, as though any of this had been part of his expected shift. He had not come there to expose a network. He had come there because 3 bags on cart B looked wrong. For the first time since she had known of him, Marina looked at Daniel Mercer without the filtering arrogance of rank. "I was going to write you up," she said. He gave the smallest nod. "I know. I asked if you understood what happens when someone uses the word security without evidence." "You did." A beat passed. She looked at the sealed container, the federal tags, the officers moving in measured lines around the cage. "And you had evidence before any of us did." Daniel said nothing. Not modesty, just fact. Back in operations control, the room changed when they entered. Not dramatically, the people straightened. Conversations lowered. The way rooms do when a story has already outrun language. Tessa looked at Daniel as if recalibrating an entire category of assumption. Paul came around the console and extended his hand without performance. "Good catch," he said. Daniel shook it once. Curtis Bell, who had been brought upstairs to confirm the original corridor sequence, stood near the back wall, clutching a paper cup he had not drunk from. He looked equal parts terrified and proud. Then Marina did something rarer than apology in institutions built on hierarchy. She made the truth social. She stepped to the center of the control floor and said, clearly enough for every nearby station to hear, "At 9:11 this morning, Daniel Mercer identified the pattern that exposed this operation." He was right. I was wrong to treat his report as interference instead of expertise. The room went still. She continued. The flagged departures were stopped because he noticed what the system missed. That will be reflected in the official incident record. No one interrupted. No one softened it with corporate language. No one reached for the usual escape routes of process gaps and communication complexity. For once, the truth was allowed to remain whole. Daniel stood in it without changing posture. That was perhaps the clearest proof of who he was. The quiet ending came later. As quiet endings usually do, by late afternoon the airport had resumed its public face. Passengers complained about delays with the ordinary entitlement of people unaware how narrowly their day had remained ordinary. The city council delegation finished its tour. Premium travelers kept demanding faster service. Departure boards kept changing. The machine, wounded but intact, continued. Daniel signed 3 statements, answered 7 precise questions from federal investigators, and declined the offer of a car home because he still needed to pick up his daughter. He found Sophie in the employee cafeteria near the back window, sitting with Mrs. Alvarez and a workbook open beside a carton of apple slices. Her blue backpack rested against her chair. The faded neck pillow hung from the strap. When she saw him, she stood at once. Children know before adults do when a day has changed shape. Dad! He crossed the room and crouched to her level. Hey, she studied his face. You're late, I know. Mrs. Alvarez looked from one to the other and understood enough not to ask questions. She handed Daniel his lunch bag. The folded constellation map still sat in the inner pocket where he had placed it that morning. Sophie touched the front of his vest. Did things get mixed up? He looked at her for a moment. Then he took the paper from his pocket and unfolded it. 7 uneven stars. For when things look mixed up. Yes, he said. They did. Did you fix it? A beat passed. A beat passed. He could have said many things. Could have explained the bags, the logs, the sealed cage, the federal agents, the director who had looked at him one way in the morning and another by noon. He said the truest small version instead. I noticed the part nobody was supposed to notice. Sophie seemed to consider this as a complete and acceptable answer. Then she slipped her hand into his. Mom said that was your thing. For the first time that day, something in Daniel's face gave way. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter. As they walked toward the staff exit, Marina Holt stood near the glass corridor beyond security operations, waiting without an assistant, without a tablet, without any of the visible armor she usually wore. She had in one hand a printed envelope and in the other Daniel's old loading manifest, the one Sophie had drawn on. It must have fallen from his pocket during the statements. Sophie noticed the paper first. That's mine. Marina handed it to her with unusual care. I know. Then she looked at Daniel. HR will contact you tomorrow. There will be formal recognition. Also a role review, if you want one. Operational risk analysis should have had someone like you in it years ago. He nodded once. All right. Her gaze shifted briefly to Sophie, to the backpack, the neck pillow, the small hand still wrapped around his father's fingers. When she spoke again, the tone had changed. You asked for 7 minutes, she said. You should have had them the moment you asked. Daniel did not rescue her from the sentence. He only said, the bags didn't care who believed me. For the first time, Marina almost smiled. Not because it was pleasant, because it was exact. Sophie looked between them. Was she the boss who didn't listen? The corridor went very quiet. Daniel was still deciding whether to answer when Marina said, yes. Sophie accepted that with the severe fairness children reserve for adults who tell the truth. Then she tucked the constellation map into her backpack and leaned lightly against her father's side. Outside, evening light lay flat across the employee parking lot. Aircraft moved in the distance with slow mechanical grace, taxiing toward runways under a sky the color of cooling steel. Daniel walked his daughter to the car, opened the passenger door, and helped with the backpack strap before closing it gently behind her. He stood for a moment with one hand on the roof. Inside the terminal, systems were already rewriting the day into reports, timestamps, procedural revisions, and names on official letterhead. That would matter, but not as much as this. A father who had been looked at like a delay had become the reason an airport remained safe. Not through noise, not through status, through attention, through restraint, through the kind of competence that does not announce itself because it is too busy holding weight. Sophie rolled down the window halfway. Dad? Yeah? When things looked mixed up again, he looked at her. She held up the folded paper between two fingers. You still have the stars, he nodded. Then he got in the car, and they drove out beneath the descending lights, while planes lifted one by one into the dark, carrying only what was meant to leave.